Trade negotiations had always been humanity's specialty, or so the galaxy believed. The small human delegation sat quietly in the corner of the Galactic Council chambers, their worn uniforms a stark contrast to the gleaming armor of the Dominion. Representatives Ambassador Reed shuffled through his papers with nervous hands, playing his role perfectly as the bumbling human diplomat who barely understood the complex politics swirling around him. The Dominion Chancellor hissed with satisfaction as he announced their latest territorial expansion. The weak species of the Outer Rim require proper guidance, he declared. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind, humanity included. Reed nodded meekly. As expected, the other council members barely glanced his way. Nobody paid attention to the humans anymore. They had been part of the galactic community for 200 years, yet remained disappointingly primitive. Their ships were slow and clunky, their weapons outdated by centuries, their military practically non-existent. It was almost embarrassing how they had managed to survive this long. What none of them knew was that every word spoken in this chamber was being transmitted to a facility, buried deep beneath Earth's surface, where General Morgan watched the proceedings with cold, calculating eyes. The time for pretense was almost over. Humanity had played the role of the galaxy's weakest species for too long, gathering intelligence, studying weaknesses, preparing for the moment when their true nature would finally be revealed. The Dominion had grown bold in recent years. Their fleets had been expanding aggressively, consuming smaller civilizations with ruthless efficiency. They believed themselves to be the apex, predators of the galaxy, and why shouldn't they? The reptilian species had conquered dozens of worlds. Their technology was advanced, their military discipline legendary. Yet they had made one crucial error in their calculations. They had dismissed humanity as irrelevant. 3 days later, the Dominion war fleet approached the human colony of New Terra with confident arrogance. Admiral Corax had brought 800 ships, more than enough firepower to reduce the entire planet to ash. The human defenders consisted of barely 50 vessels, ancient cargo haulers and mining ships that had been hastily converted for combat. It should have been a massacre, and the reptilian commander was already composing his victory report. The human ships moved sluggishly into defensive positions, their crews broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy. Corax allowed himself a moment of contempt. These mammals were even more pathetic than intelligence reports suggested. Their formation was sloppy, their weapons clearly inadequate. One broadside from his flagship would vaporize half their fleet. "Begin the attack," Corax ordered, settling back in his command chair to watch the slaughter. The first wave of Dominion ships surged forward, energy, cannons charging. The lead vessels opened fire, sending streams of plasma toward the human defenders. The energy beam struck the human ships and simply vanished, absorbed by some unknown technology. The Dominion crews stared in confusion as their most powerful weapons produced no visible effect whatsoever. Then the human ships began to change. What had appeared to be crude metal hulls suddenly shifted and reconfigured. Armor plating slid away to reveal weapon systems that defied every known law of physics. Sleek forms emerged from within the fake outer shells, their surfaces rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The 50 human vessels had transformed into something else entirely, something that radiated danger like a living thing. Admiral Corax felt the first flutter of unease. "What are those readings?" he demanded. The sensor officer's voice shook as he replied, "Sir, the energy signatures are off the charts. I'm detecting power levels that should be impossible." The lead human ship, which moments before had been broadcasting surrender offers, now spoke with a different voice entirely. Captain Williams's transmission came through crystal clear. "All traces of desperation gone. Dominion fleet, you have attacked sovereign human territory. This action will not be tolerated." Corax snarled in response. "You dare threaten us, you will be destroyed for your arrogance." "No," Williams replied calmly. "You will be eliminated." The human captain raised his hand in a casual gesture, and reality itself seemed to buckle around the Dominion fleet. The lead squadron simply ceased to exist, not destroyed or vaporized, but erased from the universe as if they had never been there at all. 8 vessels and their crews vanished without even leaving debris behind. Panic spread through the reptilian ranks as more human ships began targeting the invaders. Each time a human vessel focused its attention on a section of the Dominion fleet, those ships would simply disappear. The technology being used was beyond anything in recorded galactic history, operating on principles that their scientists couldn't even begin to understand. Admiral Corax tried to organize a retreat, but found that his ship's engines were no longer responding properly. Some invisible force was holding them in place, making them sitting targets for whatever impossible weapons the humans possessed. His communications officer reported that all long-range transmissions were being blocked. They were trapped, cut off from reinforcement or escape. Impossible, Corax whispered as another squadron vanished from existence. Our intelligence said they were primitives. Captain Williams' voice filled the Dominion command bridge one final time. Your intelligence was designed to say exactly that, Admiral. We've spent 2 centuries making sure you believed what we wanted you to believe. Every piece of data about human capabilities, every assessment of our technology, every report about our military strength, all carefully crafted lies. We needed you to underestimate us until the moment we were ready to strike. The truth hit Corax like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been weak or backward. They had been hiding their true nature, deliberately appearing inferior, while secretly developing weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. The entire galaxy had been deceived, manipulated into believing that humans were harmless, when they were actually the most dangerous predators anyone had ever encountered. Why? Corax managed to ask, why reveal yourselves now? Williams considered the question for a moment. Because you've grown too confident, Admiral. Your species and others like it have forgotten that there are consequences for aggression. You attack weaker civilizations because you believe might makes right. Well, we're about to show you what true might looks like. The last thing Admiral Corax saw was his own flagship beginning to fade from existence as the human weapon systems focused on his location. His final thought was a desperate wish that someone, somewhere, would receive word of what had really happened at New Terra. The galaxy needed to know the truth about humanity before it was too late. But there would be no warnings transmitted, no desperate messages sent to warn other species about the threat they faced. The human ships had already sealed off the entire system, ensuring that no evidence of their true capabilities would escape. Not yet. The time for revelation would come, but only when humanity chose to reveal it. The Battle of New Terra lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, not a single Dominion ship remained. The human fleet resumed their disguises, once again appearing to be nothing more than converted cargo haulers. The colony's defenders sent out carefully worded distress calls, reporting that they had somehow managed to drive off the attackers through sheer luck and determination. Meanwhile, deep in space, General Morgan received the after-action report with grim satisfaction. The first phase was complete. The Dominion had taken the bait, and now they would learn what it meant to threaten humanity. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were capable of. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. News of the Dominion fleet's disappearance spread through the galactic communication networks like wildfire. Though the details remained frustratingly vague, human colonies reported that they had somehow survived the attack, but their explanations made little sense to military analysts. How could 50 converted cargo ships defeat 800 state-of-the-art warships? The mathematics simply didn't work in the crystalline towers of the collective homeworld. The ancient minds that governed their species processed this information with growing interest. The geometric beings had always viewed humans as useful but unremarkable trading partners, valuable only for their willingness to transport goods between distant systems. Now it seemed the mammals might possess hidden capabilities worth investigating. High Coordinator Zephyr's form pulsed with calculated light patterns as it addressed the governing council. The Dominion's failure presents us with an opportunity, the entity communicated through harmonic frequencies. If humans have developed new defensive technologies, we must acquire them before our competitors do. Simultaneously, in the biomechanical hives that served as command centers for the insectoid swarms, Queen Mother Prima was reaching similar conclusions. Her species had always respected strength above all else, and the apparent defeat of the Dominion suggested that humanity might be more formidable than previously assumed. The time had come to test these mammals properly. Within hours, both species had deployed their fleets toward human space. The collective sent 300 of their most advanced crystalline ships, their hulls singing with deadly resonance frequencies that could shatter molecular bonds. The hive dispatched twice as many vessels, their organic hulls bristling with bioweapons designed to consume entire ecosystems. Admiral Hayes watched the approaching fleets from the bridge of what appeared to be a simple human cargo vessel. The ship's exterior bore the familiar markings of the Terra Shipping Corporation, complete with rust stains and impact damage from years of supposedly routine asteroid mining operations. Inside, however, lay technology that would have made the galaxy's greatest scientists weep with envy. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Davis from the communications station, "both hostile fleets are maintaining standard approach vectors. They don't appear to suspect anything unusual." Hayes nodded grimly. "Of course they don't. 2 centuries of careful deception don't unravel overnight. Signal all vessels, it's time for Protocol 7. Across human space, seemingly innocent merchant ships began receiving the transmission they had been waiting for their entire operational lives. The freighter captain, who had been hauling grain between agricultural worlds for 30 years, finally received permission to drop his disguise. The mining vessel that had spent decades harvesting asteroids in remote systems could finally reveal its true purpose. The transport ship that had been ferrying diplomatic pouches between embassies was authorized to show the galaxy what human engineering could really accomplish. The transformation began slowly at first. Individual ships started shedding their outer hulls like snakes discarding old skin. Fake cargo compartments fell away to reveal weapon systems that hummed with barely contained energy. Mining equipment retracted to make room for shield generators that could deflect the energy output of entire stars. Communication arrays unfolded into targeting systems capable of tracking objects across multiple star systems, but this was only the beginning. As word spread through coded channels, more and more vessels began revealing their true nature. The grain transport that had been making routine runs between colonies suddenly bristled with enough firepower to level continents. The passenger liner that had been carrying tourists on scenic cruises around nebulae transformed into a mobile fortress capable of projecting force across entire sectors. Within 6 hours, 10,000 human vessels had dropped their disguises across the galaxy. Every single ship that bore human markings turned out to be a warship of unprecedented capability. The cargo holds that had carried legitimate trade goods for decades were revealed to contain weapons that operated on principles beyond current galactic understanding. The crews that had seemed like simple merchants or miners suddenly moved with the precision of elite military units. On the bridge of the collective flagship, Resonance, High Coordinator Zephyr experienced something approaching panic for the first time in its 1,000-year existence. The harmonic sensors were detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to known physics. The nearest human cargo ship was generating power levels equivalent to their entire fleet combined. Impossible. Zephyr's light patterns flickered with distress. Our intelligence networks would have detected such capabilities. No species could hide this level of technology for so long. The response came not from any member of the collective, but from the human vessel itself. Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the crystalline command chamber with calm authority. Your intelligence networks saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Coordinator. Every scan, every sensor reading, every piece of data you collected about human capabilities was carefully manufactured. We've been planning this revelation for longer than your species has had faster than light travel. Meanwhile, Queen Mother Prima was discovering that her supposedly superior bioweapons were having no effect whatsoever on the human ships. The viral agents that should have dissolved any known hull material simply bounced off the human vessels like water off stone. Her swarm intelligence, which had conquered dozens of worlds through coordinated attacks, found itself unable to establish any kind of coherent strategy against opponents who seemed to predict every move before it was made. How is this possible? Prima broadcasted to Her fleet. Our combat algorithms are perfect. We have never encountered resistance like this. Captain Chen of the disguised mining vessel answered her unasked question. Your algorithms are based on data we provided, Queen Mother. Every battle simulation, every tactical analysis, every strategic assessment your species has made regarding human capabilities has been influenced by our intelligence services. We've been feeding you information designed to make you overconfident. The scope of humanity's deception was becoming clear to both hostile fleets. These weren't just hidden weapons or disguised warships. This was evidence of a centuries-long campaign of misdirection on a scale that defied comprehension. Every human interaction with galactic civilization had been part of an elaborate performance designed to hide their true capabilities. As the collective and hive fleets found themselves surrounded by vessels that outgunned them by orders of magnitude, their commanders began to understand the magnitude of their error. They had assumed that military might was something that couldn't be hidden, that any species with advanced weapons would inevitably use them in conflicts, but humans had taken a different approach entirely. They had chosen to appear weak while secretly becoming the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. High Coordinator Zephyr attempted to negotiate. We propose immediate withdrawal from human space. Our species seeks only peaceful coexistence. Captain Rodriguez's response was delivered with the same calm tone he had used when haggling over cargo rates. Coordinator, your fleets entered human territory with hostile intent. That action has consequences. You will surrender unconditionally and prepare to be boarded. Any attempt to retreat or resist will be met with immediate destruction. Similar conversations were taking place across multiple star systems as human ships revealed themselves and began systematically dismantling any hostile presence in their space. The technology gap was so enormous that resistance seemed pointless. Weapons that should have been able to crack planets bounced harmlessly off human shields. Targeting systems that had never missed found themselves unable to lock onto human vessels that seemed to exist in multiple locations. Simultaneously, Queen Mother Prima made one final, desperate attempt to rally her forces, all units, coordinate strike on the nearest human vessel, maximum bioweapon deployment. The result was instantaneous. The targeted human ship didn't even bother to raise additional shields. It simply continued on its course while every hive weapon in the system simultaneously malfunctioned. Bioweapons turned against their creators. Organic hulls began consuming themselves, and the carefully maintained neural links that connected the swarm intelligence started failing one by one. Captain Chen's explanation came through clearly despite the chaos. Your bioweapons are based on organic chemistry, Queen Mother. We've had 200 years to study samples and develop countermeasures. Your swarm intelligence relies on quantum entanglement for coordination. We've been listening to those signals since first contact and learned how to disrupt them at will. Within 12 hours of Protocol 7's activation, both hostile fleets had been completely neutralized. The collective's crystalline ships floated dead in space, their harmonic frequencies scrambled by human countermeasures. The hive vessels had turned into floating biological disasters as their own weapons consumed them from within. As Admiral Hayes surveyed the results, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of satisfaction and regret. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had never been the weak species they pretended to be. But this revelation would come at a cost. The comfortable fiction that had allowed peaceful coexistence for 2 centuries was over. Now there could only be truth, and the truth was that humans had become something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that had chosen to become apex predators while convincing everyone else they were harmless prey. The awakening had begun. The first sign that something fundamental had changed came when the galactic communication networks began experiencing systematic failures. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries suddenly found their navigation beacons dark. Commercial shipping lanes went silent. As automated traffic control systems stopped responding, emergency frequencies that had never failed in recorded history carried nothing but static on the water world of Aquatica. The dolphin-like inhabitants watched in growing panic as their orbital communication stations went offline one by one. Their sophisticated underwater cities had always relied on constant contact with the surface installations, that managed their off-world trade. Without those connections, their entire economy would collapse within days. Chancellor Nerio of the Aquatic Council attempted to reach other species for assistance, but found that every channel led to dead air. This cannot be natural interference, he clicked to his advisors. Someone is deliberately severing our communications. Similar scenes were playing out across thousands of worlds as species that had never experienced technological isolation suddenly found themselves cut off from the galactic community. The proud, avian race known as the Skyborn discovered that their vast communication arrays, which had taken millennia to construct, were broadcasting nothing but meaningless noise. Their attempts to send ships to neighboring systems were hampered by the failure of their navigation computers, which could no longer access the central galactic positioning network in the depths of space. Human technicians working from hidden installations watched their handiwork unfold with professional satisfaction. The cyber warfare specialists had spent the better part of 2 centuries infiltrating every major communication system in the galaxy. They had built backdoors into navigation networks, planted logic bombs in traffic control systems, and established override protocols in emergency broadcast networks. Commander Torres monitored the operation from a facility that officially didn't exist, buried in an asteroid field that didn't appear on any galactic chart. Phase 2 is proceeding perfectly, she reported to her superiors. All major communication hubs are under our control. Transportation networks are failing across 17 sectors. Banking systems are experiencing cascading failures. The scope of human infiltration was staggering. Every piece of technology that connected galactic civilization had been quietly compromised over decades of patient work. Human engineers had designed critical components of infrastructure that other species believed they had built themselves, communication protocols that alien scientists thought they had invented, contained hidden subroutines that could be activated on command security systems that protected the most sensitive installations, had been programmed with override codes that only humans knew. President Liu stood before a vast holographic display that showed the galaxy in real time, watching as system after system went dark. The great trade routes that had carried commerce between worlds for millennia were grinding to a halt. Fleets that had once projected power across multiple star systems found themselves unable to coordinate their movements. The complex web of interdependence that held galactic civilization together was being systematically dismantled, ma'am, reported General Walker. All primary targets have been neutralized. The Dominion homeworld has lost all external communications. The collective's central processing nodes are offline. The Hive's queen ships are operating in isolation without coordination protocols. Liu nodded with grim satisfaction. And our own networks. Completely secure, Walker replied. We're operating on protocols that predate first contact with alien species. No one else even knows they exist. The revelation of humanity's true capabilities was being broadcast from a location that had been hidden from galactic awareness for over a century. The human capital wasn't Earth, as every other species believed it wasn't any planetary surface at all. Instead, it was a massive artificial construct that floated in the void between star systems, invisible to conventional sensors and surrounded by defensive installations that could obliterate entire fleets. The fortress city of Haven had been under construction since the early days of human space exploration, built in secret using resources that the galaxy thought were being used for simple mining operations. Its population exceeded that of most homeworlds, but it had never appeared on any census or diplomatic registry. As far as galactic civilization was concerned, it simply didn't exist. From Haven's central command chamber, President Liu prepared to address the galaxy. The transmission would be carried on frequencies that only human technology could access, reaching every world simultaneously regardless of local communication failures. It would be impossible to jam, intercept, or trace, demonstrating yet another aspect of human technological superiority that had been carefully concealed. Citizens of the galaxy, Liu began, her voice carrying to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. For 3 centuries, you have known humanity as merchants, diplomats, and laborers. We have served in your fleets, built your infrastructure, and carried your cargo between the stars. You have considered us useful but unremarkable, valuable only for our willingness to accept dangerous assignments and remote postings. On the Dominion homeworld, reptilian officials huddled in emergency bunkers as their planetary defense grid flickered and failed. The massive fleet that had been their pride and joy was trapped in orbit, unable to descend or retreat as their navigation systems provided increasingly erratic readings. Admiral Voss, the Dominion's supreme military commander, listened to the human transmission with growing horror. "This is some kind of illusion," he hissed to his staff. "No species could have hidden capabilities of this magnitude." Liu's voice continued, reaching into their bunker despite every attempt to block it. "What you have witnessed is the revelation of humanity's true nature. We have never been weak. We have never been primitive. We have been gardeners, carefully tending the growth of galactic civilization until it reached the point where we could harvest what we had sown." The implications were staggering. Every human who had ever worked in alien governments, every human scientist who had contributed to alien research projects, every human trader who had established commercial relationships across the galaxy, all of them had been intelligence operatives gathering information and establishing the foundation for this moment. On the crystal spires of the collective homeworld, the governing minds processed this information with something approaching existential terror. Their entire understanding of reality was being rewritten. The humans they had dismissed as intellectually inferior had been manipulating galactic development. For centuries, the technology they thought represented the pinnacle of achievement was apparently crude compared to what humans had secretly developed. High Coordinator Zephyr attempted to rally the remaining collective leadership. "We must coordinate." A response. "This cannot be allowed to continue." But coordination was exactly what they could no longer achieve. The quantum communication networks that linked their distributed intelligence had been severed. The harmonic frequencies they used for long-range coordination were being jammed by signals that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Human understanding of collective technology was so complete that they could disrupt it at the fundamental level. Liu's transmission reached its climax as she delivered humanity's ultimatum. "You have a simple choice before you surrender unconditionally and accept humanity's guidance in building a better galactic order, or continue to resist and face the full extent of our capabilities. We have spent 3 centuries learning every detail of your strengths and weaknesses. Now you will discover what it means to face an enemy that has been preparing for this moment." Since before your civilizations achieved spaceflight, the silence that followed was profound across the galaxy. Billions of beings sat in darkened cities and disabled ships, finally understanding the scope of their situation. They had been living in a carefully constructed illusion, believing themselves to be the masters of galactic civilization, while the true power had been quietly growing in the shadows. The Hive's Queen Mother Prima, isolated in her flagship without the swarm intelligence that had guided her species for millennia, finally grasped the full magnitude of humanity's deception. "They have been planning this since first contact," she broadcast to anyone who could still receive her signal. "Every human we ever encountered, every interaction we ever had with their species, all of it was preparation for this moment." As the reality of their situation settled in, species across the galaxy began to understand that their choice was binary. They could surrender and hope for mercy from beings who had demonstrated unimaginable patience and cunning, or they could resist and face the full fury of a military force that had been secretly preparing for galactic domination for 3 centuries. The reckoning had begun, and humanity held all the cards. The first to fall silent were the proud warriors of the Dominion, their reptilian homeworld, which had projected power across dozens of star systems for over a millennium, simply stopped responding to all external communications. The last transmission from their capital was a desperate plea for mercy that cut off mid-sentence, leaving their scattered colonies to wonder what terrible fate had befallen their leaders. From orbit, reconnaissance drones from neutral species captured images that defied understanding. The entire Dominion homeworld had been enclosed within a shimmering energy barrier that pulsed with malevolent purpose. The barrier wasn't destroying the planet. It was slowly compressing it, reducing its size by measurable increments each day. The implications were terrifying. Humanity possessed technology that could manipulate matter on a planetary scale. Admiral Voss, trapped within the shrinking prison that had once been his homeworld, watched helplessly as the barrier drew closer. The atmospheric pressure was increasing steadily, and their scientists estimated they had perhaps weeks before the compression reached lethal levels. His attempts to negotiate with their human captors met with polite but implacable responses. "Admiral," came the calm voice of Colonel Adams, speaking from somewhere beyond the barrier. "Your species chose to initiate hostilities against human colonies. The consequences of that decision are now unfolding. Your people will not be harmed if they accept their new circumstances peacefully." Voss slammed his clawed fist against his command console. "What new circumstances? You're slowly crushing an entire planet." "We're demonstrating the futility of resistance," Adams replied. "Your world will be preserved, but under our complete control. When the compression reaches optimal parameters, your people will be relocated to facilities where they can be properly educated about their role in the new galactic order." The psychological impact of watching their homeworld shrink was devastating to Dominion morale colonies that had once boasted of their military might began surrendering without firing a shot. The reptilian warrior culture that had conquered dozens of worlds couldn't comprehend defeat on such a scale. Their entire worldview was built on the concept that strength determined survival, but humanity had demonstrated strength so absolute that resistance became meaningless. Meanwhile, the collective was experiencing a different form of horror. Their crystalline ships, which had once moved through space with perfect harmonic precision, began to develop discordant resonances that spread through their fleet like a plague. The geometric beings discovered that their fundamental molecular structure was being altered by frequencies generated by human vessels. High coordinator zephyrs. Form flickered with unstable light patterns as the harmonic contamination reached the flagship. The ancient entity's consciousness, which had existed for over 1,000 years, began fragmenting as the quantum frequencies that maintained its coherence were systematically disrupted. "The contamination is spreading," reported Subcoordinator Prime, its own form showing signs of structural instability. "Our attempts to isolate infected units have failed. The humans appear to understand our harmonic matrix better than we do ourselves." Captain Chen's voice echoed through the collective vessels with clinical precision. "Your species' reliance on harmonic resonance for basic existence makes you vulnerable to frequency manipulation. We've had centuries to study your crystal samples and develop countermeasures. The process you're experiencing isn't destructive, it's corrective. We're adjusting your resonance patterns to make you more cooperative." The truth was even more disturbing than simple conquest. The humans weren't trying to destroy the collective. They were rewriting their fundamental nature. The crystalline beings found their thoughts becoming more ordered, their decision-making processes more aligned with human objectives. They retained their intelligence and memories, but their priorities were being systematically adjusted to serve human interests. Queen Mother. Prima of the Hive was discovering that biological superiority offered no protection against enemies who understood biology better than she did. Her swarm intelligence, which had coordinated millions of individual organisms across multiple star systems, began receiving conflicting signals that turned her own forces against each other. The nanobots that had infiltrated Hive biosystems were invisible to their most sophisticated sensors, but their effects were undeniable. Drones that should have been following her commands started exhibiting independent behavior. Worker castes began ignoring breeding protocols that had been genetically programmed for millions of years. Warrior forms turned their bioweapons against their own nestmates in response to commands that seemed to come from their queen, but somehow felt wrong. "My children are no longer mine." Prima broadcasted in anguish to any remaining loyal units. "The humans have corrupted our very essence. They're turning our biological unity against itself." Dr. Singh, speaking from a human research vessel that had been disguised as a medical supply ship for decades, provided a chilling explanation. "Your Majesty, your species' reliance on pheromone-based command structures made infiltration remarkably simple. We've been introducing modified compounds into your food supplies for over 50 years. The nanobots currently in your system aren't foreign invaders. They're enhanced versions of your own cellular repair mechanisms, reprogrammed to respond to human control signals. The scope of human preparation was becoming clear to the few remaining independent observers. Neutral species watched in terror as the three most powerful military forces in the galaxy were systematically neutralized without the humans firing a single conventional weapon. Everything was being accomplished through technologies that had been secretly deployed decades or even centuries in advance on the ocean world of Aquatica. Chancellor Narration received desperate communications from his intelligence services. "Sir, we've discovered human operatives in key positions throughout our government. Some of them have been here for over 60 years, working their way up through our administrative hierarchy. The revelation that humans had been infiltrating alien governments for generations sent shockwaves through the remaining free species. How many of their own officials were actually human agents? How many of their strategic decisions had been influenced by enemy operatives? How much of their civilization was actually under human control, without their knowledge?" President Liu's next transmission addressed these fears directly. "Many of you are now wondering how deeply human influence has penetrated your societies. The answer is completely. We have been guiding galactic development for 3 centuries, ensuring that your technologies, your social structures, and your military capabilities developed in ways that served our long-term objectives." The admissions kept coming, each one more devastating than the last. Every major technological breakthrough in recent galactic history had been subtly influenced by human scientists working under alien identities. Trade routes that shaped economic development had been designed to benefit human strategic interests. Military doctrines that species thought they had developed independently contained vulnerabilities that only humans knew how to exploit. As the hours passed, the silence spread. The Dominion homeworld continued its slow compression, broadcasting increasingly desperate pleas that went unanswered. The collective fleet drifted through space in perfect formation, their harmonic patterns now synchronized to human command frequencies. The Hive's queen ships floated dead in space as their crews turned against each other in biological chaos. Smaller species that had been considering resistance began surrendering en masse. The implications were clear. If humanity could neutralize the galaxy's 3 most powerful military forces simultaneously without apparent effort, resistance from lesser powers would be utterly futile. The avian skyborn, who had prided themselves on their advanced communication networks, discovered that every message they sent was being intercepted, analyzed, and potentially modified before reaching its destination. Their attempts to coordinate a defensive alliance fell apart when each species received different versions of the same proposals, creating suspicion and confusion that prevented any unified response. By the end of the 72-hour period President Liu had specified, the transformation was complete. The great powers of the galaxy had either surrendered or been rendered incapable of organized resistance. The silence that had begun with communication failures had become a profound stillness as entire civilizations waited to learn their fate under humanity's new order. The galaxy that had awakened 3 days earlier, believing itself to be governed by a balance of competing powers, now faced the reality that there had only ever been one true power, carefully hidden behind a facade of weakness and servility. The silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant with the terrible understanding that everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe had been a carefully constructed lie. Humanity had won without fighting a single conventional battle, proving that the greatest victories were achieved not through superior firepower, but through superior planning, patience, and the willingness to play a game so long and so deep that the enemy never realized they were already defeated until the moment of final revelation. 6 months after the galaxy fell silent, President Liu stood before the assembled representatives of what had once been independent species, now gathered in the great amphitheater of Haven for the formal establishment of the human empire. The delegates sat in carefully arranged sections, each group representing not sovereign nations but administrative districts of humanity's new galactic domain. The transformation had been remarkably smooth, aided by the fact that human operatives had been embedded in every major government for Generations, the former Dominion territories were now managed by Regional Administrator Hayes, who had shed his disguise as a simple military officer to reveal his true role as one of humanity's most senior colonial specialists. The ex-admiral who had once commanded their fleets now served as his deputy, grateful for the opportunity to maintain some dignity in defeat. Chancellor Nerio of the Aquatic Council had discovered that his most trusted advisor for the past 30 years was actually Commander Torres, a human intelligence officer who had undergone extensive biological modifications to pass as one of his species. The revelation explained many policy decisions that had seemed puzzling at the time, but now appeared as masterful preparations for the current situation. The transition has exceeded our projections, Torres reported to Liu during a private briefing. Resistance movements have been minimal, largely because we've had decades to identify and neutralize potential leaders. The few groups that have attempted organized opposition have found their communications intercepted, their supply lines compromised, and their membership thoroughly infiltrated. The secret of humanity's success lay not in superior technology, though their weapons were indeed beyond anything the galaxy had previously imagined, but in their understanding of long-term strategic planning. While other species thought in terms of decades or centuries, humans had executed a plan spanning multiple millennia. Every human who had ever left Earth had been part of an intelligence operation so vast and patient that it made conventional espionage look like amateur theater. Liu addressed the assembly with the same calm authority that had characterized humanity's revelation to the galaxy. The era of chaotic competition between species is over. Under human guidance, galactic civilization will achieve levels of efficiency and productivity that were impossible under the old system. Each of your peoples will contribute their unique strengths to the common good, while humanity provides the strategic oversight necessary to prevent the conflicts that have plagued this galaxy for millennia. The representatives listened with varying degrees of acceptance. The collective entities, their harmonic patterns now, synchronized to human frequencies, found the logic of human supremacy self-evident. Their modified consciousness simply couldn't conceive of alternatives to the new order. The former hive drones, reprogrammed at the genetic level, experienced genuine enthusiasm for their new roles as specialized workers in humanity's galactic infrastructure. High Coordinator Zephyr, its crystalline form now pulsing in perfect harmony with human command signals, addressed its fellow former leaders. The evidence is undeniable. Humanity has demonstrated capabilities that dwarf our own. Their planning horizon encompasses time, scales we never considered. Their infiltration of our societies was so complete that resistance was impossible before it began. We are not conquered subjects. We are students finally meeting teachers worthy of the name. Queen Mother Prima, her biological imperative now aligned with human objectives through carefully introduced genetic modifications, nodded in agreement. My species exists to serve the greater collective. The humans have proven themselves to be the ultimate expression of collective intelligence. We are honored to contribute our biological expertise to their vision. The few remaining unmodified delegates struggled with the reality of their situation. Admiral Voss of the former Dominion retained his original personality, but had witnessed the futility of resistance firsthand. His homeworld remained compressed within its energy barrier. A constant reminder of what defiance could cost his people had been relocated to comfortable facilities where they were being educated about their new role as security specialists in the human empire. I must ask, Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of defeat, how long have you been planning this? The scale of preparation required seems impossible. Liu smiled with genuine warmth. Admiral, the planning began before your species achieved faster-than-light travel. We've been preparing for galactic unification since we first detected radio signals from other worlds. Every human exploration mission, every trade agreement, every diplomatic contact has been designed to gather intelligence and establish the infrastructure necessary for this moment. Dr. Morgan, the architect of humanity's cyber warfare capabilities, stepped forward to provide additional context. We learned early that direct conquest would be inefficient and potentially destructive. Instead, we chose to become indispensable to galactic civilization. We designed the communication networks you relied upon, the navigation systems that guided your ships, the trade protocols that governed your economies. When the time came to assume control, we simply activated systems that had been waiting for our command. The scope of human infiltration was still being discovered. Each day brought new revelations about the depth of their penetration into alien societies, the genetic modification programs that had been introduced into food supplies, the educational curricula that had subtly shaped how young aliens learned about galactic history, the entertainment media that had gradually conditioned entire populations to accept human cultural values. Captain Williams, who had commanded the human fleet during the Battle of New Terra, now served as administrator of technological integration. Your species developed impressive capabilities within the parameters we established for you, but every breakthrough was guided, every innovation was monitored, every advancement was channeled in directions that served our ultimate objectives. You were allowed to become powerful enough to be useful, but never powerful enough to threaten our plans. The representatives from minor species that had never posed a military threat found their situation somewhat different. They had been gently guided toward administrative and support roles in the UI New Order, their talents valued but their independence carefully circumscribed. The avian Skyborn discovered that their communication expertise was desperately needed to manage the vast information networks of the human empire. Their pride in their abilities remained intact, even as they accepted that those abilities would now serve human purposes. Chancellor Nerio found himself oddly relieved by the revelation of Commander Torres's true identity. I wondered how someone could be so consistently prescient about interspecies relations, he admitted. Your advice shaped our policy for 3 decades. No wonder our decisions always seemed to align with broader galactic trends. Torres nodded respectfully. Your species' expertise in underwater engineering is invaluable for developing habitable environments on water worlds throughout the Empire. We needed to ensure that your people would be willing partners when the time came for integration. That required building genuine relationships based on mutual respect, even if the full truth couldn't be shared. Liu addressed the broader implications of humanity's approach. Other species might have chosen conquest through force, but that would have destroyed much of what makes galactic civilization valuable. We prefer transformation through understanding. Each of your peoples brings unique perspectives and capabilities that enhance the whole. The goal isn't to eliminate diversity, but to channel it toward common objectives. The economic restructuring was already well underway. Trade routes that had been disrupted during the transition were being restored under human management, but with new priorities. The competition and waste that had characterized the old system were being replaced by coordinated efficiency. Resource allocation was being optimized on a galactic scale, ensuring that raw materials reached the facilities best equipped to process them, regardless of species boundaries. Former Queen Mother Prima reported on the biological integration programs. Human genetic modifications have enhanced our reproductive efficiency by 40%, while reducing territorial aggression to manageable levels. Our colonies are producing specialized organisms designed for specific tasks in the new economy. The partnership between human planning and hive implementation has exceeded all projections. The military reorganization represented the most dramatic change. Former enemies were being integrated into a unified defense force under human command. The Dominion's warrior tradition was being channeled into elite security units responsible for protecting critical infrastructure. The collective's harmonic weapons were being incorporated into a planetary defense network of unprecedented sophistication. Admiral Voss found purpose in his new role as Director of Strategic Security. I spent my career believing that military strength meant the ability to project force against enemies. I now understand that true strength lies in the ability to prevent conflicts before they begin. The human approach to defense is unlike anything we ever conceived. As the ceremony concluded, Liu made one final announcement that sent ripples of excitement through the assembly. The integration of known galactic civilization is only the beginning. Our long-term observations have detected signals from neighboring galaxies that suggest the existence of other spacefaring civilizations. The techniques we've perfected here will be essential for establishing contact and eventual integration with these distant populations. The implications were staggering. Humanity's ambitions extended. Beyond their current galaxy, they were already planning the next phase of expansion, the next iteration of patient infiltration and careful manipulation that would bring even more diverse species under their guidance. The galaxy that had fallen silent to human power was merely the first step in a campaign that spanned cosmic distances. Former High Coordinator Zephyr's harmonic patterns shifted to express something approaching awe. You're proposing to repeat this process on an intergalactic scale. The time frames involved would span hundreds of thousands of years, Lou's response carried the weight of absolute certainty. Coordinator. Patience is humanity's greatest strength. We think in geological timescales while others think in political cycles. That's why we've succeeded where others have failed. The universe is vast, but it's not infinite. Given enough time and careful planning, even the largest objectives become achievable. As the delegates dispersed to begin implementing the new administrative structures, they carried with them the understanding that they had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just the rise of a new power, but the emergence of a species that operated on principles so alien to conventional thinking that their success had been virtually inevitable. The galaxy had indeed fallen silent, but that silence wasn't empty. It was the quiet of a vast machine, beginning to operate with perfect efficiency under the guidance of minds that had been planning its construction since before most of its components knew they existed. The age of chaos was over. The age of human order had begun, and it would extend as far as human ambition could reach among the stars.